What's the creepiest or most unexplainable thing you've ever seen that you haven't shared anywhere? Running through a large field in the middle of a nice neighborhood on Halloween night. Got gassed sprinting halfway and reached out to hold on to a tiny tree, felt what I can only describe as claws like bugles on your fingertips wrap around my hand. Noped the FK out and ran back to my group of friends. There were no leaves because it was fall, so I still have no clue what it was. I used to live in the middle of nowhere. The town had less than 200 people in it. I used to work through the night in one of the metro areas, and it was about a 40-minute drive with about 15 of it on a county road. I used to think I would see shit in the fields, coyotes, deer, etc., all the time. Never thought twice. Well, one morning I was on my way home, about 3 a.m., and we had a little bridge to cross right before we got to our road. As I'm closing in on crossing the bridge, I can see something pearl white just hanging out in the middle of the road. Thought it was probably a swan and it would move. As I got closer I realized that swans are not that big. I was in a F-150 and it was at eye level with me. When its wings opened up, it literally covered both lanes of traffic. I swerved to miss it, but hit some of the wing. I slammed on my brakes and turned around. Whatever it was 100% gone without a trace. Never saw it again. If it was a bird, that's the fucking biggest bird I have ever seen. Oh, and I did not alive by anything considered to be a large body of water. Edit, the only thing I can describe it as a humongous crane, but the only area where cranes live close to that old house was about 5 hours away. Back when I was 9 or so, me and my friend were having a sleepover. His parents were at a dinner, and his brother was out getting stoned somewhere. Anyways, it was probably 9 p.m, his parents had just called and said that dinner had turned into drinks, and they would be out for a little while longer. Anyways, we were young, playing Minecraft on the Xbox 360. When we heard his front door open. It had a very noticeable noise when it opened, very creaky, almost eerie, so we thought, oh, it's probably just your brother. And kept playing, thinking nothing of it. Then, we heard footsteps on the floor above us. We once again thought nothing of it, seeing as his kitchen was above the basement where we were playing games, and his brother was likely there for mid-high munchies. But then, we heard another set of footsteps. We were confused at this point, but we didn't worry as it was either his parents or a stoner friend of his brother. We then heard a scratching at the basement door. We both looked at each other like, is that just me or is there a scratching? He didn't have any pets, so, me being the oldest by 2 months, went to go check. I opened the door and there was nothing there. I yelled upstairs to his brother, let's call him Jim. Jim, you're not scaring us. Stop it. No reply. So I sat back down and continued playing. Now, there was a scratching on the window. We were honestly terrified, and we stayed seated, one of us looking at the door, the other looking at the window. Then, again, scratching at the door. I opened it with a baseball bat in hand, and nothing. We barricaded the door, and put things in front of the window. We didn't hear anything for the next half an hour, and eventually fell asleep. The next morning his dad came down and knocked on the door, and tried to get into the basement. We took down the barricade, and his dad came into the room, furious. Why the hell did you guys rip open the screen door? We went upstairs and sure enough, the front door's screen was shredded. We tried to convince him that it wasn't us, and that the brother had done it to scare us. But what he said next made our blood run cold. Jim wasn't home at all last night. We dropped him off in the city with his friends. My friend's house was half an hour away from the city, and none of the people at his friend's house had cars. Me and my friend looked at each other, and couldn't speak. Needless to say, his parents didn't believe us. They called my parents, and me and my friend had to split the cost to have the basement door replaced. It had tons of scratch marks as well, and the screen door replaced. Me and my friend still bring this up to this day. Whenever we meet, edit 1, holy shit, I had no idea this would blow up. FAQ, did you get your money back? A, yes, I got my money back after they moved. FAQ, could it have been an animal? A, yes, it's a possibility, although when I opened the door I didn't see anything. So, I was definitely atheist pre this shit. Now I'd got to believe. Last fall I had a dream with my deceased grandmother. We were in a casino in Wendover playing blackjack, and she was basically just catching up. She looked young again and was in a very lovely black dress and shawl. We drank and laughed and played, then she had to go. It was a really vivid, lovely dream. Cut to about a week later at my sister's birthday party. She's talking to one of our cousins about a dream she had a week prior with our deceased grandmother. Detail for detail, it was the same dream that I had not told anyone about. The difference? Me and Grandma played blackjack, they were playing poker. I still to this day have no logical explanation, but it's the strangest feeling I remember having. Thanks for the responses, everyone. Yes, coincidence is definitely the most logical explanation for this dream. Few things. I've never been to a casino with my grandmother. Also, my sister and I are not very close. We grew up in different homes and see each other holidays, special occasions. With the timing and details, they could just be coincidence, but it's all a bit too many coincidences for me to just dismiss. Personally anyway. A couple of summers ago, myself and some friends from university went to visit one of our friends' houses, since we were going to a festival nearby and had been offered to stay over. Long story short, her family are extremely rich with a huge, old mansion in the English countryside. As with any home this big, we had a bit of a tour around and were shown our guest rooms. Her dad began to tell us that the place was haunted, in a joking tone, and mentioned that when they first moved there, a dresser had been left behind in one of the guest rooms, the one I was staying in. This was one of the only things left behind, and they'd found a lock of hair in one of the drawers. I'm not really a believer of ghost stories, so at the time I just shrugged it off as a joke, although it's still a bit weird admittedly. That night I got into bed and began to notice that the air felt strangely cold around me, but there wasn't a particular breeze. The rest of the house had been a perfectly normal temperature just before this too. As I slept, I kept having the most surreal dreams, nothing like when I'd normally sleep. I'd constantly awaken feeling cold. It was like when you're very unwell and find yourself somewhat hallucinating in bed while you dip in and out of sleep. The other weird thing was that this was the middle of August, and in the UK we don't typically have air conditioning, not unless you're in an office or something. I woke up the next morning and on one side of the room there are two hanging rails for clothes. The guest room is normally used for storing spare clothes. Several of the clothing items were on the floor, the hangers had completely come off the railings, and I could have sworn these were all hung up the night before. Like I say, I'm not really a believer of paranormal stuff, but that night has spooked me ever since. I've never experienced anything quite as strange. I do wonder if her dad's stories of it being haunted had planted a placebo in my head, though. I've told this story on here before. I used to live in really rural Texas and was driving down a farm to market road during some very thick fog. I was in an old pickup truck, and was going maybe 20 to 30 miles per hour because I couldn't see very far ahead. Super glad I was. As I came around a turn, I saw through the fog this big hulking figure lurching across the road. I slowed down, pulled up near it to pass, and saw what was the biggest hog I've ever seen in my life. A good 400 pounds certainly. It was dead, probably destroyed whatever car hit it, and dragging it to the side of the road, an absolutely massive white shaggy dog. Y'all, this dog. I was in a pickup truck, and this dog made eye contact with me, lifted its head, and stared me level in the eye for what felt like an eternity. I stopped my truck and stared. I was so caught off guard. After probably a few seconds, felt like forever, it put its head back down, grabbed a chunk of hog and continued making its way off the road. To break it down, this dog was smart enough to move the animal it wanted to eat, large and strong enough to drag a 400-ish pound hog across pavement, and tall enough to look me in the eye in a pickup. I will never forget those eyes. It had mud-stained white fur, a big block head, and a long wolfy tail. It looked almost like a Pyrenees, common around there, but with a big St. Bernard-shaped head and double the normal size. Big glowing yellow eyes. I have no idea if it was some freak mutant farm dog, a spirit, a wolf, or what, but I'd like to never see it again. Edit, it looked sort of like this dog but all white with much longer legs and a bottle brush tail. It was a little more shaggy and a little less floofy too. Maybe a Pyrenean Mastiff mix and my mind is playing tricks on me? It was just so absolutely massive though. When I was 20, I visited a town in Italy that has a number of medieval towers that you can climb. My girlfriend didn't want to climb any, so I went up one on my own and was the only person at the time doing so. It was a sunny day when I entered the tower. There was a flight of stairs that wound around the edge of the tower and no windows. Climbing the tower took at the very most 5 minutes. At the top of the stairs there was a ladder and a trapdoor that opened up onto the roof of the tower. When I opened it, I found the weather had changed dramatically and was overcast and threatening. I forget if there was thunder or not, but I was genuinely concerned about lightning being at the top of a tall tower in that weather. I cautiously climbed out onto the roof just to have a quick look before going straight down. The roof was surrounded with a sort of metal cage of bars that were clearly intended to prevent anyone jumping off the tower. I heard some thunder and saw electricity arc between some of the bars, not a blinding lightning strike, just arcing. I decided that the tower was imminently going to be struck and descended as quickly as I could. At the bottom I was surprised to find the weather was again sunny with a clear sky. My girlfriend could tell I was shaken, and was amazed when I told her I thought that maybe there had been lightning. The weather hadn't changed whilst I'd been up the tower. I've started to tell the story a couple of times, but it's just too weird to expect anyone to believe. I have literally no explanation. I'm very much a skeptic when it comes to the paranormal. I'm not religious, and I've had no other weird experiences like this. In short, I'm not your stereotypical spooky things happen to me kind of person. And yet did a bit of googling and I'm 90% sure it was the Torre Grosso in San Gimignano. It doesn't have a cage around the top, but there is a metal cage around the bells, and I guess that's what I remember. A decade ago a girlfriend, let's call her M, moved in with me, but she gave me a warning. There's a man that follows me. He's not evil or anything like that, but he doesn't like men. That should have been the time I noped the F out of my own home, but I was in love and just accepted her wild statement. Fast forward a few months later, home alone, M just left for work and I'm showering. I hear the bathroom door open and hit the dresser behind it. I look to my right and see a shadow through the curtain. I jokingly say out loud, "Oh, you're back for some bonus shower time?" As I open the curtain, nobody is there, still home alone. A few days later I come home from work and hang my keys on the hook like I always do and walk away. An hour goes by when I notice my keys rocking back and forth on the hook. Minutes turn into hours as my keys keep rocking. Finally M comes home and looks at me, looks at the keys and asks how long? I just stared at her as she stops the keys as if it was as common as op not delivering on a locked safe. The two worst ones happened close together. Again I'm in the bathroom, on my knees as I scrub the tub. I feel as though someone is next to me, breathing on me. As I jerk away a hand grabs my leg and yanks me towards the bathroom door, and then nothing. That night I'm out with a group of friends. I'm telling them these same stories, and at the end the light above us flickers and shuts off. As we all look up to the light, my chair gets picked up and thrown into the table. I turn around to scold the jackass behind me, but nobody was there. Everyone just stared at me with shocked looks on their faces because they just witnessed the man. The finale. It's late and Em is downstairs in bed. I'm turning off the lights as I hear our laundry room door close and footsteps leading to the bedroom. My brain is thinking Em is awake, so I go to the bedroom. I open the door to the sound of her softly snoring. I turn around and am hit with the loveliest smell I have ever experienced. It's the smell of my late Nana's home. Her perfume is everywhere. After that moment the man was gone. It's like she came into the home and removed his presence. I can't explain it. All I know is that I haven't smelled that scent in well over 20 years, and I doubt I'll ever smell it again. TLDR/I had a ghost that haunted me, and my late Nana made it disappear. I used to live in a house with two roommates. Let's call them Anna and Erica. I lived on the second floor and Anna and Erica lived downstairs. Every night I would hear this thud coming from downstairs. I would investigate and it always came from Anna's room. I thought it was her doing burpees or working out at night, which seems dumb looking back. I never talked to Erica about it because I thought it was in my head, and since I was on the second floor it never really bothered me. Fast forward 2 years and we all move into a new house with another roommate. Anna, Erica, and I live on the same floor upstairs. I start hearing the thud louder now. I go up to Anna's door and it sounds like she's hitting herself against a wall and whispering and crying or laughing. I also noticed when she left the room she had her sheets all scattered on the floor. I ask my other roommate Erica about it and she says she hears it too. Anna starts staying at her parents' house more often, but every time she comes home we hear the same thud, thud noise. We started asking Anna about it and she makes up excuses like I was moving furniture or my porch door was swinging open. After we started questioning her more, she only came to our house maybe once a month to pick up some clothes. It was so strange. I never think we'll get an explanation. When I was 15 I started to read Pet Sematary, so I am at my home. My parents work the night shift so I am alone, and around 2 a.m. the morning I am well into the book. It's a real page turner. In the book moment cat comes back from cemetery, I hear a noise outside my window. I live on the entrance floor, open my curtain and a black cat perched on the ledge looking inside. I knocked the window to scare the cat and the fucker hissed at me. Shat myself. The fucker stayed there for a good couple of minutes, but then again this was in Turkey and cats won't give a fuck since they know we won't hurt them. When I was about 16 my friend stayed the night at my house. At the time I was really into the paranormal and had just learned about EVP, electronic voice phenomenon. That night we had watched Mothman Prophecies before going to sleep. I remember it was storming outside and there was thunder and lightning, important later. Before going to sleep I had set up a microphone on my PC to record sounds. My house had some weird things happen in the past and watching that movie pumped me TF up to get an EVP that night. I start the recording and test the mic. I could see spikes on the track when we talked and I specifically remember seeing a huge spike when some thunder rattled the house. The next morning I stopped the recording and noticed that there was only 4 hours of audio but we'd been asleep for nearly 8 hours. I started listening to the audio and it seemed normal at first. I could hear the conversation we had right after starting the recording but no longer saw the big spike from the thunder which I initially dismissed. Upon further inspection I see a spike on the track about 2 hours in, which would have been around 3 a.m. I moved to that section of the track and hit play. In the recording I could hear what was obviously my cell phone ringing but only partial sections of the ringtone. It rang like this 3 or 4 times and then I clearly hear an unfamiliar voice say hello? In a hushed tone. I immediately grabbed my phone and checked the recent calls and the last call I received was earlier the previous day when my friend called asking to hang out. No incoming or outgoing since. My brain exploded. I immediately called my friend's phone to see if his ringtone was the same. It wasn't. He woke up looking confused about getting a call from across the room, and when I explained what I found and played the audio, he was clearly a bit shaken and shied away from any paranormal conversations I tried to initiate from then on. Bonus: in addition to the weird phone call and missing thunder, throughout the recording was short sections of audio with a quiet but obvious train horn. This wouldn't have been weird because my house was very near a busy railway. However, this was more like an old school train whistle rather than a modern horn which I'd never heard my entire life living there. Later that day when I heard a train go by I tried to record the sound with the same gear thinking that the sound was somehow distorted, but what I found was that the horn was barely audible. This was strange because the train whistle in the EVP was loud enough to make a visible spike on the recording track. Edit: I did post this on a similar thread a few weeks ago but I got in so late, virtually nobody saw it. A friend and I were parked in the countryside at night getting stoned. It wasn't uncommon for people our age to do this. Head into the country, find a safe spot and get out and party a bit. We found a safe spot, got out and lit up. We were basically surrounded by woods and it was about 2 a.m. and pitch black. Out of nowhere, we hear birds almost like a crow's call going nuts. So loud, and very close, several different birds doing the same thing, a caw. That was shortly followed by a sound of some sort of big cat, probably a cougar. Its scream was deafening and very close. We got out of there at max speed, both jumping into the car without saying a word. After some research, we come to find out the state we were in, Illinois, has no populations of any mountain lions or cougars. That was about 15 years ago and I still think about it. Like how close we were to danger? Hell, I still have no clue what it was, but those birds are the true brothers. My brother committed suicide in 2010. He was airlifted 100 miles from his house to the town by us because it's a large town with great hospitals. His wife, the only person that lived with him, of course drive her car to the hospital leaving their house completely closed up and locked. His cell phone was left in his home office by his wife. The next morning I got a call from his cell phone. I answered but nobody was on the other end. I said hi a couple times with no response. I finally said everything is okay and the line immediately disconnected. Never got a call from that number again. My brother gave me 2 cats before leaving the house for 6 months. One of the cats could not adjust, she became sad and stopped eating. We tried everything with her, but she eventually passed. One night I woke up to the sound of a cat walking in the room and some meowing, but the other cat had been snuggled up with me. It was a pretty sweet moment, I think, or maybe due to the stress of her passing I just dreamt it. I don't know, lol. My grandfather passed away several years ago after many years of dialysis. As he aged, we were told this treatment wouldn't last forever and become less effective and they would have to stop it eventually. He was 83 when he passed, always fit and healthy, and the dialysis kept him going a good few years. He was unwell and taken into hospital, his dialysis was stopped and we were told it would probably be around 48 to 72 until he passed. So all the family made our way to the hospital and stayed in the room with him as much as we can. They made him comfortable and was plying him with drugs to make sure he wasn't in pain. As he nears the end, he was in and out of a lucid state, most of the time in a slumber, almost living memories, mumbling and muttering. If he woke up, he would stare transfixed at a point on the ceiling, talking to God only knew who, as clear as day, and then he would drift off again. This happened all night. Moments before he passed, he sat up staring at this point on the ceiling, talking clearer than he had for the time we were there. Holding my grandmother's hand, he turns and looks her dead in the eyes and says that they are asking him if he wants to take a message over to anyone. Was there anything she wanted to say to anyone? When my grandmother said there wasn't, he lay back down, closed his eyes and passed peacefully. The whole room was silent. Every single hair on my body on end. I'm not religious but felt I should go straight to church and start praying or something. My mother, who has been a nurse all her life, many years caring for elderly, told me that when a lot of people die they focus on a point on the ceiling and talk to whatever is there. Her telling me that didn't help at all. Bizarre. When I was about 8 or so, my family went up to a campsite near a lake. We went with several other families and they brought their kids too. One thing me and this one kid would do is search the shallow areas for crawdads. As I was searching, I began to venture a ways out until the water was up to my waist. The water wasn't too clear but it also wasn't muddy, and I could see the pale area of the shallows and the darker area where the water dropped off, but I didn't know that at the time. I ended up stepping into the darker, deeper water and began to fall in. Before I could, a pale, slender arm grabbed my leg and pushed me back to the shallows. All I saw was the arm as it sunk back into the deeper water before I skittered back to the shore. I remember it as clear as day, but nothing has ever turned up from that lake, no bodies, no drownings, nothing. My parents still think I made it up. I swear, him being haunted. My mom has this big stand thing where we put hand creams and face masks, and it's about an inch away from the counter closest to the toilet. Sometimes, when I use the toilet, it falls over onto me. I have one of those lamps with like 5 heads and the shades are all different colors in my room for extra light. Sometimes, when I'm sleeping, I'll wake up to a loud bang. I open my eyes, and my lamp is lying on the floor. My little brother, one, has a toy piano, where as long as you just touch the keys, it plays. Often, I wake up to that piano playing. My siblings are at daycare and my mom is at work by the time I wake up, so I'm alone. I always turn it off, none of my siblings play with it, and it only happens when I'm alone. I have a white heat lamp for my geckos, but we haven't used on in a few weeks. Every time we screw in a brand new bulb and turn the lamp on, the bulb pops and sometimes shatters. We've checked 1,000 times, and we're using the right bulb wattage for the right heat lamp. We even bought a new lamp, and the bulb still breaks. If anyone has any explanation for any of these, please tell me. I'm scared to use the toilet, and I'm scared to fall asleep. Edit, the bathroom stand is a good 2 feet tall and pretty heavy for its size, and only falls over on me. I've tried the heat lamp in multiple different outlets and I've tried different brands of lamps. The toy piano did start playing randomly until about late February. We got it for Christmas 2019, and we had just recently changed the batteries. Edit 2, thank you all for your advice and help. I really hope I can solve this thing. I was young and digital cameras were a new thing. I was obsessed with them and my mom would buy me a camera, we'd try it and see if we liked it, and if it was shitty we'd take it back. We purchased a cheap one, Indoor pictures had a red and yellow hue. It had long exposure, so a lot of the times there were streaks and weird stuff. I took a picture of my room one day, and plugged it up to the computer to view the picture. There was a full-blown man, wearing sweatpants and a sweatshirt with a hat. There were also light streaks in the picture, but he clearly looked different from the imperfections, like there was a man actually there in mid-walking motion. I called my mom right before commenting this to ask if she remembers that. She said she didn't really. I don't believe her because the camera immediately disappeared after this event and she never got me another. When I think about it now, I'm in my late 20s, it still makes tears come to my eyes because the house I grew up in was so scary and weird. I've never felt like that in any other home. Something was off. I met my first boyfriend when we were both 17 and in our last year of high school. His dad has passed away when he was 15 from lung cancer, and he was still having a hard time with it. His living circumstances at the time were also pretty dismal, but that's another story. My ex smoked cigarettes, which his dad was really against before he died, but he did it anyways. His pack of smokes would disappear almost daily and appear in the most random places. Under the fitted bed sheet, in between the mattress and box spring, buried in a basket of clean laundry, eat. One night we were laying in bed and his headboard had a ledge to it that he kept his smokes and drinks on. I was laying down looking straight up as he sat up to grab them and they flew off the headboard. I saw them twist a bit and then just get tossed. We were both stunned for a minute before we both agreed we had seen the same thing, but it still took us a half an hour to find the pack because it didn't fly across the room but instead ended up underneath the bed quite a ways in. We weren't close to a wall, so they didn't ricochet. One night I was on my side in his bed looking at the wall and a clear shadow of a man appeared in front of me. Thinking it was my ex, I started talking and joking around but he didn't answer, so I looked over my shoulder. No one there. Looked back at the wall and the shadow was still there. It lingered and walked away before my ex came back into the room. That happened occasionally. I always thought it was just him checking in and seeing what I was like and if he was happy. Finally, we had a pretty rough breakup. He had a lot of demons. He cheated and became abusive. It was bad. He left pretty quickly, as we lived with my family and he was unstable, but he left behind most of his stuff. This included his dad's ashes, his vinyl collection, magazines, guitar, etc. It was all he had left of his dad and I refused to throw them out, so I kept them in my bedroom closet even though it took him a year to finally come around and get them. The night that everything got picked up, I heard my closet door rattle and things move around the perimeter of my room. My lamp on my nightstand flickered on and off. It was his dad's lamp he let me keep because I used it for crafts, and my cup of water rocked back and forth. I said goodnight, Mr. and take care of insert X name. A few moments later my bedroom door rattled and that was that. He was a pretty chilled ghost. He did smoke a lot of hash in life, so that might have helped lol. Many years ago, I was riding home on a city bus, one I'd ridden many times before, on a route I'd been on many times before, on a perfectly fine day. Then about 4 blocks from home, an overwhelming feeling of dread came over me. I had no idea why, but I felt absolutely sure that something very bad was about to happen right then and there. I walked to the front of the bus as calmly as I could, and told the driver that I felt sick to my stomach. Which was partly true, but mainly it was because I knew they'd stop and let me off right away, which they did. I immediately started walking home. I did not hear the bus start up again from where it stopped to let me off. A block away, I looked back, and it was still there. Another block. Still there. All the way home. Still there. I went inside and calmed down, then came out about 10 minutes later to look. The bus had still not moved. I went back inside. Half an hour later, it was gone. I never did find out anything more.